This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. For this episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, I'm again in Belgium, and joining me to talk about Oud Bruin is Alex Lippens from Verzet. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Oud Bruin is not something we talk about a whole lot here on the podcast. Obviously, it's a classic Belgian style, and you all have set out with the stated goal of making the best Oud Bruin in the world, or at least that's what you told me before we started this podcast, that's your goal.
Yeah, that's absolutely our goal. Aim high.
Aim high, make the best Oud Bruin in the world. And so with that said, you have some very clear, interesting processes about how you do that, whether that's working with other brewers around you, whether that's varying aging, varying boiling processes, varying fermentation methods, using different types of grain through your Oud Bruin, malted, unmalted barley. You have been doing lots and lots of experimenting in the world of Oud Bruin in order to find what can help you make the best Oud Bruin in the world. And we are going to pull through some of those things. And, maybe we'll talk about some other beers at the end of the podcast, because I love the fact that you have a beer called Super Noah. That's no American hops. Getting out there and making beers that celebrate Belgium, but do it with a rock and roll attitude and a lot of energy. Anyway, we're gonna approach Oud Bruin from that perspective. Before we do it, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer, but don't just take it from me.
Hey, this is Josh Erickson of Cofounder Brewing in Mandeville, Louisiana. The team at G&D were a critical part of our 10X expansion, always just a phone call or email away. And thanks to their superior equipment, technology, and documentation, commissioning our new chiller was smooth and straightforward. Now we can't wait until we need to upgrade our existing chiller.
That's right. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is the industry partner that brewers trust to take their operations to the next level, especially when it comes to canning their product for distribution. By partnering with ProBrew, brewers can fill and seal their canned product at ranges from 100 to 600 cans per minute. Their unique filling process also ensures low dissolved oxygen pickup and focuses on product quality during the entire process. For more information, visit probrew.com or email them at contactus@probrew.com. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, you may have heard of Old Orchard, but have you heard of their latest flavors? Berry Blend, Blood Orange, Lemonade, and Tart Cherry are the latest additions to their lineup of flavored craft juice concentrate blends. Old Orchard's R&D teams can also formulate custom blends unique to your needs. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Alex, tell us the Verzet story. Interestingly enough, this story connects with another brewer that we've had here on the podcast, Joran from Halfway Crooks, who was one of your original founders here of the brewery. And I love watching how these things intersect, cross over, cross oceans and everything else. But tell us the Verzet story. Tell us how you all got started and why you went ahead and created this brewery and why you have then focused on the beers that you do.
Joran Koen, who is now getting some stuff for bottling tomorrow and is not available for the podcast. So Joran Koen and myself studied biochemistry in Ghent, and in our third year we chose brewery technology as a course. And all the others, 38 others, choose for gen technology to dissolve the diseases of tomatoes. I myself was not so good with DNA copying, so I want to study brewery technology. We three were the only 3 guys choosing that year in 2008, brewery technology. We get along during the labs. And also drinking beer afterwards in Ghent, in the bars. And
Ghent is a fun town. We were there a few days ago.
it's the best town in Belgium for me. And we finished our studies in 2008. We just collected 10s and 11s. We didn't have like high points, but we just get our...
You scored high enough.
Yeah, high enough to get a certificate. And we start working in big breweries. Koen worked at the Proefbrouwerij. That's for common people not well known because they don't have their own brands, but they do a lot of contract brewing and for very interesting breweries or gypsy breweries like Mikkeller. Two Eul also started there. Myself worked for Omer van der Henste, a local family brewery who's also making an Oud Bruin, but are most famous for their triple Omer. And then Joran started working at Kasteelbier for 2 years. He's the job hopper of us three. 2 years at Kasteelbier, 2 years as a colleague of mine. And he is the most adventurous guy of us three. And he get in contact with, I don't know, the founder of 3 taverns in Georgia.
Sure.
But the founder was searching for a Belgian brewer because he wanted to start up a brewery with Belgian beer styles. And he found through his uncle, Peter Boekaert from New Belgium, he connected with Joran, and Joran said, I want to go to the States and help out starting up 3 taverns.
Sure.
And then later on, started with Sean, Halfway Crooks. So that's our our professional trajectory,
like a family tree or something.
What we already
trajectory. I see what you say. Yes,
what we did in the brewery world since 2008. After a half a year in the working field, we start to connect, like chatting to each other. What's going up in your work? What mistakes did you already made? And what's up? And we needed an excuse to drink beer and try exciting beers that we had the last months. And we start home brewing in 10 liters.
So you're working in professional breweries, and then we're coming home and home brewing with each other still.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a great story.
Needed a hobby to and an excuse to drink beer.
Sure.
So, and
that's how you know you love what you do.
We don't have I don't have hobbies next to brewing, so I still don't. Hey. So, and because Koen and worked at the Proefbrouwerij where a lot of beers were made. He brought each month new exciting beers with new hops and new ingredients. Also, Joran did his internship in the States. I was not so exotic. I went to Affligem, but they brought in new beers around the world, from around the world, and we were trying them. And during those home brews, we were like starting dreaming of our own brewery, not listening to our bosses. And with those beers, we were seeing in the Belgium breweries, they were like the time was standing still. And not new exciting things were happening. It was like they were feeling that they made the best beer in the world, and we saw exciting beers coming up, and we said, that's what we want to do, try new stuff, getting out on our face about maybe making something that is exciting, and maybe nobody will like it, but we will learn from it and become better brewers. And also Koen worked at the Proof, and guys from Scandinavia came in with metal t-shirts full with tattoos. And when we went to events of Belgian brewers, they were like all dinosaurs with gray hair with their suit on. And we came in with our shorts and t-shirts, and we said, we didn't read a memo.
Yeah, there's a lot of churches and monks here on
on the labels.
Really into monks and churches. So yeah,
and also the labels were like old school churches and monks, and we said, "Fuck it, we want to have rock and roll on our labels." And we saw like a gap.
And I shouldn't say there's nothing wrong with churches and monks.
No, but it wasn't.
But only churches and monks, and not a diversity of things. I could see that. Yeah.
It was not attracting. Well, we loved the beer, what was inside a bottle, but we saw a gap. In Belgium, there was, we were missing rock and roll, a brand that we were attracted to that was rock and roll, new stuff, touching the borders of drinkability or excitement. And that's where we saw the gap to start up our own brewery.
It's interesting that you say that, because then you also created a framework for innovation in beers, but you didn't want to just make the same kind of hyper fruited kettle sours or New England style hazy IPA as other foreign breweries. You wanted to apply that rock and roll attitude, and that we're going to push the limit within Belgian beers, with Belgian beer styles.
Yeah, we want to be an added value to the Belgian beer scene, not want to be like a cover band brewery and copying American brewers and just like, West Coast IPAs now popular. Let's find a recipe on internet and like drop it here in the Belgian market. We wanted to drink those beers, learn from it, and inject it in the Belgium beer styles, and like make hybrids, or because also then Belgian people, we want to do that Belgian people understand our beers and not be like 100% off what we already know. End it on the Belgian beer tradition and move along with that, but with new things, adding to the Belgian beer styles.
No, I think that's a really cool approach to take, to be punk rock, but not needing to get rid of the entire thing, just needing to figure out how to make Belgian beer a little bit more punk rock.
Yeah.
But that also gives you a creative framework to work within. And so now you have to push exploration in this focused kind of way rather than just doing everything. So one of the things that that you all focused on in a core way is Oud Bruin, something that probably isn't the most popular, like amongst the those seeking out the rarest of Belgian beers these days. But it's something that you're hyper committed to. What has driven the love of Oud Bruin for you?
The beer style is the style of our region. Belgium is not big, but we have a lot of beer style regions, and Oud Bruin is one of Southwest Flanders. The Saison is from Henegouwen, so like the Lambic is from around Brussels. It's crazy how small Belgium is, but we have like regions of beer styles. And for us, Oud Bruin is from our region, but it's not so popular anymore with the young people. Even in 2008, if you talk about Oud Bruin, everybody thinks about their granddad and their old uncles. And we wanted to make that style popular again and trendy, not by copying Rodenbach, but adding our own identity to the beer style and make it a hype again, and that people say, yeah, that's my kind of beer. And it's a unique smell and taste. And that's maybe the hardest part. It's a very cold beer style, but we still love it. It's like in our DNA.
Well, we are going to talk about how you make cool Oud Bruin, and how you have taken your Oud Bruin in ways that make it Verzet in your pursuit to create the best Oud Bruin in the world. Before we do that, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5. Using their Lumina technology, Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. Perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. Also, ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brew houses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. So Oud Bruin, obviously it's not, you only brew about 15%, Oud Bruin, or 15% of the output of the brewery is Oud Bruin. It's not the majority of what you make, but it is philosophically at the core of what you make. It's something that's one of those deep loves that justifies, creating this brewery and going through all of this process. So as you think about Oud Bruin, and maybe we should talk about what, like, the line between Oud Bruin and, Flemish Red, if there is one, how you use those terms, what they mean. And then we can start talking about, how you think about building the beer itself.
Yeah, we call it from day one Oud Bruin, and maybe beer geeks will flip out and say, "No, you're making a Flemish red ale." And Michael Jackson is the guy who divided us.
That guy.
Yeah.
It's time to rethink some Michael Jackson.
He did a lot for Belgian beer, but he was wrong with that by dividing Oud Bruin with Flemish red ale, where for him Oud Bruin is the non-barrel-aged version and the Flemish red ale is the barrel-aged version. For us, Oud Bruin is the big family name because it's the slang of the people. People use the word for either beers. So if you ask a Roeselaar Oud Bruin, you will get a Rodenbach. If you will ask an Oud Bruin and Oudenaarde, you will get a Liefmans. In Kortrijk, it depends on the pub you go. You will get a Bokor from Van der Henste or a Bavik, or maybe one of our Bruins. So
sure.
it depends. The bar doesn't ask, "Oh, do you want a barrel-aged version or not?" People know it's mixed fermented beer. It's a dark beer, a brown beer, sweet, sour, and it depends on which brewery it comes from. It has their own identity and signature of that brewery, and that's why we call it Oud Bruin, and we love that beer style.
Sure. So it's just like the big name. The big name is Oud Bruin, just like we call something IPA. And then, yes, we can get into tighter, definitions of what this is. But you say barrel aged, and like even within barrel aging, what we're talking about is some difference amongst makers as to whether they are fermenting in stainless steel, whether they are fermenting in wood foeders. And then there's different fermentation approaches too that all of these makers who make Oud Bruin also participate in, and that's those are different, like either doing a clean fermentation that you then push beer onto souring bacteria, or a complete mixed fermentation. There's lots of different ways to go about making Oud Bruin. Maybe we put off that question of fermentation for a minute and start talking about the big character piece of this, and that I think starts probably with malts, right? I mean, malt becomes, these are reddish brown beers, and that kind of range of malt character is so important in building the kind of richness that the beer demands. And so, as you were setting out to make the best Oud Bruin in the world, how did you start writing a recipe for grain?
We started it with 50% of our malt bill is caramelized malts, because it gives a lot of layers of like sweetness, caramelized malts, red fruit that you even get from your malt. So for us,
that's a lot of caramel malt.
yeah, it doesn't help the filtration always.
Sure.
But it helps on the final taste of the beer after the barrel aging. It's an added value. But we know also from other Oud Bruin makers, they have a simpler malt bill. It depends, but for us, it's 50% of caramel.
50%. Yeah. How do you? What I assume you're building a certain range of caramel flavors using some of these various caramel malts. How do you? How do you choose those caramel malts, and what has driven you to select the ones that you have?
In the beginning, it was like a wet finger. Just I don't know how to say it in English. It was just
let's just try something.
Yeah, try and error. And after a few years, we came to 25% of Cara 50. That's like 50 EBC color, and that's like 25%, like 12.5% is like 120 EBC malts, and then Special B from Dingemans is like have a lot of raisin taste. It's a fantastic malt. That's also 12.5%, and it helps out the full flavor roundness of the final product. If you don't want to like add sweeteners to your final beer, which we don't.
You're right. And then the other half of that malt is base malt barley?
Yeah. In the beginning, it was Pilsner malt, but the last 3 years, we use also unmalted grain from a local farmer.
Unmalted grain?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That seems like an unusual choice.
Yeah. It's because we love experimenting, and that local farmer approached us that he want to change the farm and not invest in having cows anymore, but more have his focus on his grain, and he want to be an added value to the market, and he wants to start up a local maltery. And he asked us, do you want to try my grain and test what's working, what's not working? And because we love experimenting, the last 3 years or 4 years already, we're working with him and seeing what's working well, what's not working. And now of all the beers that we make, 20% is this year unmalted grain, barley, unmalted barley. And it's working very well. For
all of the beers you make.
Yeah, all the beers that we make.
That much unmalted barley, that seems wild to me.
We're lucky with the malted barley that's such a good quality and has so much active enzymes that they can cut all the starch of the unmalted barley. And with some extra enzyme steps, it's working very well.
Tell me about that. How do you step mash with that much unmalted barley?
In the beginning, we did start at 54 degrees Celsius, like a protein step, and then go to 63, the beta amylase step, and then goes to the 72 Celsius, the alpha amylase step, like a normal Belgian infusion step process. But the last 3 months, we noticed that we had sweet spent grain, and now the unmalted barley, we have a decoction step. So we start at 72, so that you have the starch will, how do you say it? Will be available for the enzyme. So we do start the unmalted grain on a higher temperature, so the starch will get unlocked for the enzymes, and then we start with a low temperature. We add them to the malted barley with the active enzymes, because with the high temperature
so a bit of a cereal mash then for the unmalted barley.
Yeah, it's like if you would use corn or rice, but then for the unmalted barley. So if you're like want to go home on time, it's not the best idea. But
sure, that's a long brew day.
But if you have that extra hour, it's a perfect way to go, and we have perfect results for the beers of all the beers that we brew.
That's really interesting. And so obviously there's the wanting to support local agriculture and connecting the beers that you make to this local agriculture. But if it didn't serve the flavor of the beer that you're also trying to make, then you probably wouldn't do it. From a flavor perspective, what does it add anything in particular?
Not that we notice.
So it just works like your normal barley.
Yeah. The luck part is that it doesn't give you like off flavors or special flavor. You can't recognize it, and that was one of the specific things that you can't notice it. And then we don't want the marketing part has to it's with local malt, and you have to it's that taste. You have to get along with it. No,
you don't want to ask people to sacrifice just for local malts.
Yeah. Flavor is the primary thing that we want to select on.
Sure. Well, let's get back to. I mean, that's interesting, and what a cool way to bring in. In terms of barley varieties, I mean, how did this? How did you work with a grower to make sure they were going to grow something that was going to work really well with the beer that you made?
They come up with how do you say it? Selections of grain that they can get their hands on.
Sure.
We're not so into, but they're looking to the bakery world with the proteins and the starch levels. And with their background, they're saying, that would be a good one for beer brewing. And then they ask, how is it on brewing? Like your filtration, the extracts that you get, the taste, the flavor.
Right.
That's how we work. It's a little bit rock and roll, not so scientifically that we maybe have to be, but like Fingerspitzengefühl. How is it brewing with it without all the science? That's how we roll with the grain.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Well, let's go back and again back to talking about this recipe. Building an idea of Oud Bruin. So you've got malt again, 50% base malt, including this 20% unmalted wheat. Super cool. 50% of this is specialty malt. You've got a cereal mash process going on for this, for the unmalted barley portion of it, and then you've got a pretty significant step mash process to work through all of this in order to create basically, the wort that you're going to go through, a normal Saccharomyces fermentation with before you then sour. Again, I'm jumping ahead to our fermentation, but I'm just trying to keep track. Is there anything else to that hot side, that mash process, in terms of how you use caramel malt, or anything else to that whole process?
In search of the best Oud Bruin in the world, we have in each Oud Bruin blend that we make, we have a partial of the super boil.
Super boil.
Yeah.
Tell me what the super boil is.
We've got it from a book of Oud Bruin. We've got it from a book about Oud Bruin around Oudenaarde, and you had a paragraph that there were brewers that boiling their wort 20 to 24 hours. We said, why? We asked Rudy Hikire from Rodenbach, and he didn't want to give any details why they did it. So we
didn't want to encourage anyone to go there.
So we had to try it ourselves. And we boil our wort for 16 hours, because the first time we did it, we get also a party and we had a hangover. So we were bored of it after 16 hours. So we never went to the 20
to 20. It all the way to 24. No. Okay.
But we were happy with the result of the 16-hour boil, and we we simmer. We do like the boil is not a heavy boil, but like simmering, like spaghetti sauce, like a good spaghetti sauce.
Right.
And you make melanoids.
Sure, melanoids. Yeah,
Yeah, like sugars and proteins getting that new molecule melanoids, and it's unfermentable even for wild yeast, and it gives a round flavor. And also during barrel aging, more red fruit in flavor and in taste. And it's an added value to the base blend of our Oud Bruin. So we have, for the nerds...
I love it that it's a take on, I mean, because American stout brewers now, imperial stout makers will brew or boil for 8 or 10 or 12 or sometimes as many as 30 hours and do multiple mashes, 2 or 3 mashes, and over that course of a 30-hour, like the insanity to create very thick and viscous beer. The process involved is crazy, but it's kind of cool that you're taking parts of that to build a blending component that'll end up in your best Oud Bruin in the world.
Yeah, we think we have to make 7 base Oud Bruins, all with their different identities, and if you blend them together, we will get the best Oud Bruin in the world.
7? Yeah. 7 different bases.
Yeah, it's a holy number, so maybe it's gonna be 8, but it's commercially a good idea. Until we're there, we say 7. So we think if we do have like 7 base Oud Bruins, all with their own layers, if you blend them together, we will get the best Oud Bruin.
And Super Boil is one of
the 7.
Yeah. What is how much does that boiling process reduce the beer itself? Like what is that? What is the difference of then what becomes Super Boil? How does that boil impact? Obviously of the melanoid flavor. But is there more? I mean, assume there's more density. It's more of a more viscous liquid too.
Yeah, we evaporate 50%, but then before cooling, we add water again. So we don't want like a high gravity beer because our Oud Bruin is only 6 ABV, and we don't want to make it like a 12 ABV. So it's like insane that we add water again, but the molecules are in there. So, but the viscosity, we bring it back down. But but the melanoids are in there and gives the flavor in the beer.
So it's flavor then, and not viscosity, and not mouthfeel focused.
No,
interesting.
Well, it gives mouthfeel, but not like a thick mouthfeel.
Right.
It's the unfermented melanoids that we want, and not like high sugar flavor.
Right. Well, let's talk about. Then what fermentation looks like. And I also want to get back and think about what, because we've now talked about 2 different variations of these 7 variations that all need to go into what could potentially be the best Oud Bruin in the world. But that leaves 5 more. So I'm curious what the other 5 could be. But let's talk about fermentation a while, because you use a method that is familiar to me. It's the same method that New Belgium, where I live in Fort Collins, uses to make theirs. They brew a lager beer, but a pretty neutral lager beer, and then fully ferment that, and then put the fermented beer into tanks with their culture, and that kicks off the second fermentation with that mixed culture. There are other Oud Bruin makers who pitch mixed culture from the start, and all of the fermentation is mixed culture. You conduct a Saccharomyces fermentation first, and before you go into the souring process. I want to understand why you do that. Before we talk about that, this episode is brought to you by Yakima Chief Hops. The 7th annual Veterans Blend from Yakima Chief Hops will be available for pre-order on June 24th. $3 from every pound sold of the Veterans Blend will be donated to this year's nonprofit Stop Soldier Suicide. The Veterans Blend is dedicated to providing financial support to nonprofits who provide assistance to our military veterans and their families. Plan ahead for your 2024 and 2025 Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and Independence Day beer releases, and place your Veterans Blend pre-order on June 24th. Also, Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers, yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hop flavors. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low, even with large hop additions. Tropics strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops. And they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping. Mention this podcast for 20% off of your first order. And if you're a brewer who's also interested in distilling, subscribe now to the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast, available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Hosted by Sydney Jones, head distiller for Fuse Spirits in Chicago, and Molly Troop, master distiller for Freeland Spirits in Portland, Oregon. This podcast explores the technical and creative processes behind great spirits through conversations with some of the leading distillers working today. It's everything you love about the Craft Beer Brewing podcast, but focused on distilling. Click on the link in the show notes to give it a listen. All right, Alex, let's talk about fermentation. Why did you strategize the way that you do? What is it about fermenting that way that you think is going to make the best Oud Bruin in the world?
It's about first most risk control, because we make mixed fermenting beers, so with wild yeast, but also we make clean beers. Like 80% of our beers are clean beers, but we don't pasteurize in our brewery. So we have like the crazy idea that we don't want wild yeast in our primary fermentation tanks. It's just a belief, and that's why we don't...
Even here, yeah. You're concerned about that.
Yeah. We love taking risks, but we also want to have our clean beers has to be clean. And that's why we do the primary fermentation only with Saccharomyces. And you have also more control. That's why we know the story of the Dolle brewers. Worked a long time with the yeast of Rodenbach before they were bought by Palm. And it was the mixed fermentation culture. But then you have like in that blend of lactobacillus and Saccharomyces that they use, if you repitch it, the lactobacillus will take over, and then you get a strange blend. And the last time that they could use the Rodenbach strain, they thought, we're gonna repitch that yeast, but their beer started to change. I talk about the 90s. So you have to know what you're doing with mixed fermenting and primary fermentation, but because things can change.
Sure, these yeast or living organisms in competition with each other for the limited resources that you give them. Yeah, and they will try to fight each other to the death and take over given enough time. Sure. So you do a neutral fermentation. How do you ferment this beer that will then become Oud Bruin?
So we have wine fermenters that we can keep the temperature between 23 to 28 Celsius. We ferment it for a week or so, and then...
Is it a Belgian yeast? Is it,
Yeah, it's a dry yeast. It's a T58 of, I don't know which...
Sure.
Everybody will know T58, yeah. I think. So no secrets in that. It can give you a banana flavor, but I don't think in the final product you will get a lot of banana at the end. So... a typical Belgian yeast strain. And then we transfer like one batch of 2,000 liters to 8 barrels. And then we pitch our home culture to it. And how we get our home culture in the beginning, we were still home brewers. We put like 200 liter, the volume of 1 barrel in our cooking kettle outside, lambic-wise, get our culture overnight in it, and then fermented it in the barrel, and we got lucky.
Right, because that can only happen in the Sun Valley.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the wild yeast knows where to stop.
That's what I hear. I hear it can only happen in the Sun Valley.
Yes.
So you left it overnight here, and something took to that wort.
Yeah, we got lucky, and we know that maybe the next time we will not get as lucky as that time. So what we did when we emptied the barrel, take the slurry and pitched it that time in 5 barrels that we bought. And since then, when we make a blend, and mostly it's of 10 barrels, we take of the best 3 barrels, that the most yummy barrels that there are in that blend. We take that slurry and repitch it in cleaned barrels. And so like we use like the idea of sourdough bread, always using your culture and repitch it and give it new food, and it going, we're already now the 13th year that we do it like that, and we have good results with that idea. And we're not like looking under the microscope, you cultures can join and you can't. It's just the most delicious barrel is keeping on giving.
Do you know what's in that culture? You haven't bought?
No, totally no idea.
Oh, you rock and roll. I find that interesting because, in the Oud Bruin that we're drinking that you package, it doesn't have a strong Brettanomyces character. You would think that there would be more. I mean, there's some, but it's not a dominant piece of that. How do you keep it so lactobacillus focused in that kind of souring process? How do you massage that to be the flavor that you want? Because yes, it's this wild culture, but it also has to taste the way that you want it to taste to be the best Oud Bruin in the world.
We believe that we don't have like the Brettanomyces flavor is because we don't do the hopping like they do in lambic making. So we don't use a lot of overaged hops. They do it to like control the sourness. And we have seen we bitter to 20 IBU bitter units with the fresh hops, and maybe that's if you have old hops over, then we use the old hops economically, but we don't like age our hops, and so we can use a lot of them in it. Hops like will control those lactobacillus, suppress the bacteria, so Brettanomyces have time to take over. But for us, lactobacillus are the fastest, are much faster than Brettanomyces, so they will control the volume, the flavor, and Brettanomyces have no chance of controlling.
And you've already done a pretty full fermentation, so now you've got not a lot of fermentables left in this. And you're putting them in this environment, and it's got to be the thing that's going to thrive the fastest, which is probably going to be that lacto that'll outcompete the Brettanomyces, isn't it?
Yeah, but we never tested it out, and we see if we do more hopped beers that the Brettanomyces are stronger in flavor
because you've suppressed the lactobacillus with more hops.
Yeah, and that's also one of the 7. Blends is more hopped Oud Bruin to control the sourness, and so you can control the sourness of the total blend.
All right, so now we got 3. I'm gonna keep a running count here. More hopped is the okay. Tell me about how you then you then take the culture from your best 3 barrels and split that amongst 8 barrels every time you fill a new brew of Oud Bruin. If I got that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then, so what conditions do those then sit in? Obviously, lacto loves warmer temperatures in order to be the most effective, but you keep them pretty cool here for the most part.
Yeah, our barrel room is next to our maturation room. That's cool to 5 degrees Celsius. Sorry, I don't talk Fahrenheit.
That's all right.
So our room of
our international audience, who only speaks in Celsius, is going to love this episode at the expense of our American brewers. But having said that, there's enough American brewers that understand Celsius these days. It's pretty cool if you're a lager brewer to only talk about Celsius.
Okay. Good to know. So the room is between, in the winter, 10 degrees Celsius, and in summer maximum 23. And it helps. It's next to the cold room. And I know like the lambic makers are strict where that they don't want to extend certain temperature because of the acetobacter. They're like, but I've talked about the Kamaradsky Balsamico, and for a certain Oud Bruin beer, we love acetobacter. So those barrels are on the hot side of the room.
And I guess we should explain more on that. You make a very purposely acetobacter, not just forward, but like a balsamic inspired acetobacter focused beer that is solely for blending purposes. Because it's just so acetic on purpose that it's not drinkable by itself.
Yeah, that was an idea of Koen, my colleague brewer, who was in Italy on a sour beer festival. And after a visit in a balsamico maker, he had the epiphany to make a beer that smells and tastes like balsamico. And luckily, we had like Oud Bruin with too much acetobacter that time. And he made a blend of 20% of that Oud Bruin with a stout, which was in bottle of Mikkeller, a black hole of a stout of 16%. And he blended that the day after he gave it to me and let me taste it. And I say, fuck, what's that? And he say, an idea for a new beer. And since then, we make a big stout of 16% ABV, sweet, chocolatey. And then we blend 20% undrinkable Oud Bruin with that 80% of that stout. And it gives a balsamico flavor, full-bodied, that sourness. And that beer is so popular that we now have to make on purpose undrinkable Oud Bruin.
These barrels are absolutely amazing to look at, covered in spider webs. The obviously the bung is not in the top, like they are open to the open oxygen with a covering over to obviously keep the liquid safe, but they look decrepit and like they're breaking down there in the corner, but that's what it takes to make hyper excessively acetobacter forward beer.
Yeah, it does. So all the lambic makers would put us on a cross, I think, if they would see it.
Sure. So, but then, so you pitch then culture in your normal barrels. Let's not talk about the acetobacter one. That's going to also give a lot of brewers a little, cringe. You pitch that culture, and then how long do you then let that go? But how long does that culture take to then start achieving what you want it to achieve, and for the flavors that are going to create these beers that you'll then blend into Oud Bruin?
Minimum 1 year. On the period when we sold the most Oud Bruin, it was the minimum 8 months, but that's the absolute minimum. But now a year is the minimum, and it can take up to 4 years that we barrel aged the Oud Bruin. And then we taste 20 barrels and blend them together.
So when it comes time to release it, do you have a yearly release schedule for Oud Bruin where it's like, now we're going to pull a blend together, or do you do that several times a year?
We do it several times a year, depending on the stock on the bottles in our in the stock. If we see, oh shit, we're gonna have no more Oud Bruin in a month, because it takes the re-fermentation in the bottle takes a month or so. We start to blending and tasting the barrels.
But then it also requires you to be forecasting also and looking ahead, because you then have to decide when to keep filling new barrels so that you'll have beer to pull out at that kind of time frame. How much leeway do you have then in timing in terms of when a barrel might be ready versus when it may start turning into something that isn't as good, or maybe there's some beneficial piece to even longer aging if something does have to sit in a barrel.
Until 2 years ago, we just filled up the barrels when we just emptied them.
Yeah.
But after COVID, the sales dropped a little bit. So now we're looking more to the statistic that we don't have too much barrel-aged Oud Bruin that's sitting there and is dead stock. And also, if you're going over 4 years, it's too much acetobacter and you can't do anything with it.
Then you just have a bunch of old stock and you don't have as much of the different pieces to pull from.
So it can also be too old, so you have to watch out. And that's what we are doing now. Before COVID, it was easy. Just fill up when you empty it. Clean the barrels and go for the maximum. Go. But now we have to be also watching what are we going to sell next year? What's the volume? Have to be looking more to the statistics.
Sure. How do you clean the barrels between each of these pitches?
I don't know if you have seen it. You have like on the right side down corner, down the barrel, you have like a 1 or a 2. If there's a 1 on the barrel, if I don't know if they on the website see the pictures maybe, then the beer is pitched the first time and we do only a refill, and then we put a Roman number 2 on the barrel if we didn't clean the barrel. And elsewhere, we clean the barrel with boiling water and no chemicals, and just sulfuring the barrel afterwards, and then refilling and pitching.
You'll do that because you want to, again, keep selecting the best culture, and not just whatever. Sometimes it's what was in that barrel, but a lot of times it's this natural selection process.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the blending piece of this then. So it comes time to create a blend. As you mentioned, it takes multiple different types of Oud Bruin to blend together to make the best Oud Bruin in the world. And so how do you then, you taste through these, how do you then, as a team or as a blender, craft the idea of what that perfect blend should be?
It's already changed the idea how we want to blend since we started it. And I think it will still evolve. What we think is the best Oud Bruin in the world, and where we want to blend to. What we want to do is that people can recognize that it's our Oud Bruin. It's a fantastic flavor and smell. And that's our Verzet signature is in the beer. That people can blind taste the beer of Belgian Oud Bruins and say, that's a Verzet.
And what do you think it is that makes it, how would you define that Verzet flavor?
That's a hard question.
It sure is. It sure is. What are some of the other components? Okay, so we talked about your normal, your super boil, your hopped that might have a little bit more bread expression in it. What are some of the other pieces that you also tend to pull into a blend in order so that it has this Verzet character in a finished blend?
You have like the red fruit, the wood flavor, and there are we also experimenting with not only oak, but like with chestnut. And if you have more money, we want to work with acacia and cherry wood. We want to try other kinds of woods and try what they do to add to the flavor. So a good Verzet Oud Bruin has to have a good malt bill, that you taste the dark malts and acidity, but and that the first sip is that's like a punch in your face, but the second is hot summer. So you have to taste the sourness that it's a sour beer. We don't want to be an everybody's friend beer. It's a sour beer, so it's gonna be sour, but accessible. A good that you taste that it's barrel aged, and there we're still searching of does it has to be only oak or other woods as well to be the best, and a good fruity flavor that people think that's fruit in the beer, but there isn't. That you can like mindfuck that, like you want to with each sip that you have another layer and say and like, I didn't taste that in that sip before, and that it's like a song that at one moment you're listening to the drummer and then to the guitarist, and that's but it's one harmony, and that's what we want.
Sure. How do you, as you're tasting and pulling from these, how, is there a general split between very old, middle-aged and maybe 1 year old? How do you think about like building these, or does age not matter as much as how each individual barrel develops?
Age doesn't matter for us. It depends on the taste and on the complexity of each barrel. And with the small barrels that we use, they can evolve very different in different directions. Even from one batch of the brew that we divide on 8 barrels, they can even go very divided. You can't say those 8 will taste the same. And that's what we love. For us, like Oud Bruin making, it's like painting, and each barrel is like a color, and you want to make your painting, and you have to try to make the most beautiful painting you want. And you have to taste, and that's the fun part of making Oud Bruin, tasting.
And it should maybe look like the other paintings you've made, but not be the exact same painting that you already made before.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be exact a copy. You have to recognize it, the painter, and that style, but not like, and I think also the public that drink our beer love, it's that year, like in wine, nobody matters. It's another harvest that it tastes a little different. You want the signature of the winemaker, and not that it be exactly the same of the last year. As brewers, we made it ourselves too hard. Want to try to make it exactly the same as the year before.
Sure. But that kind of there is a brewery here in Belgium that makes the very consistent product from year to year and never changes. But that's not a brewery that you care a lot about right here. Let's not get into that conversation. Let's talk about some of the ways that you then also create other kinds of, say rock and roll expressions of Oud Bruin, because you do everything from adding oak leaves, conditioning on other additional fruits, more barrel, like you have other ways that you then also take Oud Bruin and kick it up another notch. Talk to me about those processes.
So we have like a range of infusions, we call them, with different kinds of fruits, like raspberries, strawberries, which are grown a lot in Belgium. We have one with blueberries, with oak leaves.
Oak leaves seems like a challenging ingredient to work with. Tell me about using oak leaves in an infusion.
Where I got the idea from was like from a hippie book from my wife, who says into gardening and into permaculture. And I like to be influenced by not only other breweries, but like getting ideas from everywhere. And there was like a paragraph of oak leaf wine. And I said, there has to be something greater than ourselves that gives me this to read. We make beer in oak barrels. Let's put oak leaves to it. And we just experiment with no idea what's it gonna get. In 2013, for the first time, picking oak leaves from the forest in September when a lot of tannins are in the leaves. then dry them for 2 weeks, and then add them for 5 months in a stainless steel tank with beer that's already a year barrel aged, and like make a tea like macceration. And people enjoyed it, and since then we make it each year, and now we get 15 crazy people helping us out, picking a whole day oak leaves, and we get like 3 cubic meters of oak leaves. And we love to do stuff with the big brewers that I worked. Each beer has to get a big public, and here with Verzet we can experiment and maybe fell on our faces and that the beer isn't anything, but then we know and we get more ideas to make the base beer even better. You get more knowledge that you can learn from, even from your mistakes, and that's what we love with Verzet, doing the crazy stuff. And people, the customers love also. We have a certain public that loves those experiments, and that's why they are following us and our search for making the best Oud Bruin in the world.
So you've also taken a page out of the Lambic makers' books and made a mega blend with other Oud Bruin makers, testing some of this theory and tasting all of these other Oud Bruins and blending them together and going through that process to also think about it. Tell me about how you've brought together and married all of these for the last, for now 2 different years of mega blend of Oud Bruin.
Yeah, because we want to make Oud Bruin great again and put them on a piedestal. I don't know, like Lambic is. Which Frank Boon has a lot of credit for that. We said, why invent new stuff if we just look what he did to one of the things, and working together is one of the things. And we made a mega blend because maybe one of the 7 pieces of our puzzle to make the best Oud Bruin in the world isn't even our hands, or and we're searching in that mega blend, 12 different breweries. We bought 200 liters of their barrel-aged product, Oud Bruin, and blend them together to find out what's happening if you blend 12 breweries together, what gives that as end result, and learn from, that's what we take from it. We tried each beer separately, that and the customer can't drink. They have the mega blend, but we have the knowledge of all the 12 selected beers.
Sure. What did you learn from that process? What did that teach you?
Some new ideas to find out some parts of the 7 blends that we have that we will need to make the best Oud Bruin in the world.
We're going to keep saying that phrase and see how many times we can say that over the course of this episode.
Maybe it can be a drinking game.
Sure. Open up a bottle of Verzet Oud Bruin and take a sip every time we say the greatest Oud Bruin in the world. There's the drinking game. And that, so what you learned then was that maybe something you hadn't considered in terms of how a flavor expresses in one of these other Oud Bruins changes or impacts or highlights or complements the blend in some other kind of way that you hadn't really thought about?
What we noticed is you have like the sour Oud Bruins and the more sweeter Oud Bruins, but if you like blend 12 different together, that you have like a measurement, the pH4 titration. Well, what we do is you can measure your pH, how sour your beer is, but what I've learned at Omer, that you also have a pH4 measurement. It's a little bit similar to the winemaking, like the blue...
A titratable acidity rather than pH, sure, or acid.
And it gives like a buffer index of your sourness, and that gives you more an idea of the sourness of your beer than only your pH. And we noticed that if you blend all those 12 together, that you have like a the perfect sourness to the beer. It was
they buffer each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we noticed where we have to, not only by taste, but by measurement, go to on numbers. If you want to blend on numbers, where the best number is to blend to. If it's logical, my explanation, I don't know. It's
sure
maybe a little bit chaotic.
So you're blending towards the right amount of titratable acidity or total acid in the beer.
Yeah, and that learned in the beginning, you were more punk rock.
Sure.
Just, we have to be the most sour, but now after 13 years of blending, we know the numbers are also say a lot.
What's your favorite number for titratable acidity then?
Like between 15 and 20 milliliters natrium hydroxide. That's for us the perfect sourness. Where like a bone, if you do it in lambic, he's go to 8 to 9. But that's for us too soft. We want to go to 15 to 20.
Yeah.
So we also...
And some of the very light Berliner Weisses can be down in the 5-6 range or something down there too.
Yeah. But that gives had given us a lot of knowledge of where the others are and how you can blend for the perfect sourness.
How do you then balance that finished acidity with residual sweetness, with final gravity? How much sweetness does the beer also need to have there?
For us, it ends on 3 Plato.
3,
yeah. Which is high for a mixed fermenting beer, but the super boil helps a lot with that to keep that high enough. Because with the melanoids, you have the unfermentable products, and that gives a certain mouthfeel to your beer.
Sure. Well, let's zoom out now. Your goal is to create the best Oud Bruin in the world. What is left to figure out about how you make it? The challenge is still there. You don't necessarily know that you have done it yet. You're continuing to try. What's it going to take? What's the missing piece that's left?
40 years more experience. So we just keep on going. And it's the road that we love. It doesn't has to be like a recognition, because we never enter a contest. So we never will know. But if people come here, and that's one of my personal goals, that we're like a pilgrimage for Oud Bruin lovers, and people keep on coming and doing word of mouth. You have to go there. They make one of the best is already good. If that's happening the coming 40 years, we're already happy, and we will keep on searching to be the best.
Well, there's plenty of reasons to come to Belgium and explore beer, and Oud Bruin is definitely one of them. This section of West Flanders is a great place to come and explore that. And Alex, I think that's a great place to bring this to a close. Choose G&D chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Take your operations to the next level with the experts at ProBrew. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5 gives you juicy, modern hop flavors without the haze. ABS Commercial are proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country. Get your order in now for the 7th annual Veterans Blend from Yakima Chief Hops. And if you're a distiller or curious about it, check out the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to Craft Beer and Brewing, and support our mission to bring you great conversations like this one from wherever they are in the world, wherever passionate, dedicated, highly focused, and highly motivated brewers are there with the intention of making some of the greatest beers in the world. Wherever they are, we are here to have those conversations. Alex, if people want to learn more about Verzet and your approach and your quest to make the best Oud Bruin in the world, where do they find more about you? Out there, either here or out there on the internet?
Yeah, they just can mail us if they have any questions or come by. We're happy to give a tour and share our knowledge that we already have and say we don't know everything, but what we know, we want to share, so we don't mind. So,
well, I appreciate you sharing your viewpoint on making Oud Bruin with all of our listeners too. It was great talking with you. Cheers.
Thank you for the invite.
Of course, can't wait to drink a little bit more before we have to leave. As they're beautiful beers, and you can taste the love in them. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.